Stranger Things uncovers some exceptionally frightening creatures over its seasons, each one being more dangerous than the last. These characters are critical for the show's world building, tension, and evolving threat. Monsters such as the nightmare-inducing Demogorgon or the pack-hunting Demodogs, alongside the airborne horror of the Demobats, fuel the show's main source of access. In this video, we'll focus on the three monsters and explore their origins, actions, and roles in the narrative to clearly show how each one contributes to the deepening menace of the Upside Down. Demogorgon, origin and nature. The Demogorgon was the first monster that was introduced to the audience in Stranger Things. It was introduced in Season 1, which established the theme of the whole series. Although their later seasons have more complicated villains, the Demogorgon was a well-done character since it was straightforward and unexplainable. It was unpredictable but had a definite pattern to hunt, kill, and take. Demogorgon's introduction is directly linked to Eleven's psychic abilities. She came across the creature in the Upside Down while performing an experiment inside a sensory deprivation tank at Hawkins' lab. The lab had been trying to use her powers to spy on Russian agents, but it triggered a chain reaction when she made contact with the creature instead. A portal opened between the dimensions and the Demogorgon entered Hawkins. The Demogorgon was also the first living being to find its way toward the Upside Down from the human world. It kidnapped and killed several individuals, starting with a scientist at the lab. It then took Will Byers, followed by Barbara Holland and several others. It moved through temporary portals that it could open across dimensions, though it's unclear to the audience how it created them. Lights would glitch in its presence, and it often showed up in places with electrical disturbances. The creature stalked its victims silently. It didn't talk, and it didn't appear to use any tactics beyond brute force. It reacted to sound and was extremely drawn to blood, which worked as an advantage to Nancy Wheeler and Jonathan, who tried to trap and wound it. Although they managed to injure the creature with fire, it survived and retreated. What makes the Demogorgon more threatening as compared to other monsters in the later seasons is that no one understands what it is or how it works. Eleven didn't know what she had found, and Hawkins' lab had no real explanation either. The lack of information around the creature elevated its impact on the story. It was a threat no one could predict or prepare for. The name Demogorgon came from the kids. After Will disappeared, his friends started referring to the creature using a Dungeons & Dragons reference. In their recent campaign, Will's character had been defeated by the Demogorgon. Using this familiar name to help them rationalize something they couldn't explain, this also helped them communicate the situation to each other without needing scientific knowledge. As the season progressed, we see the kids, Joyce Byers, and Jim Hopper all working separately and eventually together to understand what exactly was happening in Hawkins. The creature became the center of their investigations. Nancy and Jonathan discovered that it dragged its prey to the Upside Down instead of immediately killing them, as seen with Will, who was kept alive in an organic nest of some sort. The final confrontation with the Demogorgon was at Hawkins Middle School. It goes for the kids directly once it's done killing several government agents. Eleven, nearly out of strength, manages to destroy the Demogorgon using her psychic powers. In doing so, she vanishes. The assumption is that she went into the Upside Down, but the details are left unclear until the next season. Season 1 never offers the audience a complete explanation of what the purpose of Demogorgon was. It's later implied that it may have been connected to the larger hive mind controlled by the Mind Flayer or Vecna, but in Season 1, those connections are not visible yet. After a certain point in the story, the Demogorgon functions purely as a predator from a different dimension, one that threatens everything it touches. Its visual design and behavior were consistent with horror and sci-fi influences from the late 1970s and 1980s. The Duffer Brothers drew inspiration from films like Alien and The Thing, where non-human and aggressive creatures appear with barely any context and become unstoppable threats. By limiting information and focusing on reactions from characters, the show used the Demogorgon to introduce viewers to the Upside Down and the dangers tied to it. Demogorgon, physical appearance and abilities. The design of the Demogorgon is unsettling because of its deliberate simplicity. It walks upright with long limbs and a tall, thin frame resembling a human silhouette. It has no eyes, no facial features, and its head is smooth and closed until it opens, like a flower, revealing rows of sharp teeth inside fleshy, petal-like flaps. This particular head design ultimately became the defining image of the creature, and it does a lot of the work in creating fear. It removes even the slightest emotion and replaces it with something cold, predatory, and unreadable. Its motions are torn and rapid. It walks on its toes like many animals, giving it an animalistic edge without fully leaving behind its humanoid shape. The arms end in claws. The body is covered in slimy, burned skin after a key confrontation later in the season. It growls, screeches, and its presence is often marked by flickering lights. All of these choices contribute to making it feel like it doesn't belong in the normal world, because it brings its own logic, its own rules, and its own atmosphere with it. The fear element is not only what it appears to be, but what it can do. The Season 1 Demogorgon has a unique power that future versions of the creature lose. It can tear holes between dimensions. These are temporary gates through which it travels between the two worlds, the Upside Down and the normal world, pulling people across the veil at times without warning. Such unpredictability of this force contributes to the tension throughout Season 1. It's too late when the town of Hawkins understands that the walls between worlds are too thin. The Demogorgon is also strong enough to break through walls and carry a grown adult without effort. It's highly durable, surviving gunfire and close combat attacks that would kill most living things. It's only when 11 uses her powers that it's ultimately stopped. There are hints of telekinetic ability when it unlocks a door without touching it, but the show never confirms the full extent of this power. The vagueness keeps the threat active. The creature also tracks blood. It can detect small amounts across dimensions. It doesn't matter if you're hiding or if you think you're safe, which plays into the horror of its attacks. This sensory ability reinforces the idea that the Demogorgon doesn't play by normal rules. Even after it's set on fire in the house scene with Nancy, Jonathan, and Steve, the Demogorgon appears to recover quickly. This suggests a healing factor that makes it even harder to stop. In the end, it's 11's psychic attack that completely dissolves its body. Until that moment, the Demogorgon is nearly unstoppable, and it proves to be far more dangerous than a random monster. It's a physical and symbolic representation of everything unknown about the Upside Down, something which is very capable of doing real damage, even though it's out of anyone's understanding. Demogorgon, role in the series. The Demogorgon's role in Stranger Things Season 1 is clear from the beginning. Its first major action, the abduction of Will Byers, set the entire season in motion. From that scene onward, every major narrative thread is shaped around either the consequences of that disappearance or the effort to stop the creature responsible. He's taken from his home by an unseen presence, which is later revealed to be the Demogorgon and dragged into the Upside Down. This single event catalyzes 3 separate investigations. Joyce's desperate attempts to find her son, the kids' search guided by Dungeons & Dragons logic and their friendship with 11, and Chief Hopper's grounded and procedural inquiry. In every thread, the mystery of the Demogorgon is the central point. The disappearance of Will sets an instant mystery. His friends and his family begin searching desperately. The town assumes he's run away or drowned, but Joyce believes that she's communicating with her son through the lights in their home. What's clear from the start is that Will was taken by something no one in Hawkins can explain because he didn't disappear out of thin air. This choice of victim becomes very important here, as Will is young, vulnerable, and close to several key characters. So his absence naturally affects a lot of people, like Joyce, Mike, Jonathan, Dustin, Lucas, and Chief Hopper. The Demogorgon is largely quiet. Joyce begins to lose her mind, but does not surrender. Hopper begins to suspect something suspicious and dives into the secret practices of Hawkins' lab, even though he was initially skeptical. The boys, meanwhile, come across 11. Her connection to the monster reveals that what they're dealing with is something far stranger and more dangerous. 11's connection with the Demogorgon is one of the season's essential threads. She first makes contact with the creature in the sensory deprivation tank through her psychic ability, like we mentioned. It's through her mind that the lab discovered the Upside Down, and it's because of her that the barrier between dimensions weakens. Her fear, guilt, and trauma are all tied to the creature's existence. Every time she's asked to talk about the monster, she hesitates, because it's something she feels responsible for. Barb's death is another major turning point in the show. While Will's abduction is mapped out as mysterious and slow building, Barb's fate is more final and brutal. Her disappearance helps Nancy and Jonathan enter the story more directly. They start hunting for clues, discovering evidence of the creature's movements, and learning more about the Upside Down's rules. It appears in specific, high-emotion moments, using fear and noise as openings. This selective behavior makes it unpredictable, which helps maintain tension throughout the season. All the different plot lines merge by the time the final episodes arrive. Joyce and Hopper enter the Upside Down to find Will. Nancy and Jonathan try to trap the monster, and 11 prepares for a final confrontation, recognizing that she can't keep running from it. The final fight takes place at the Hawkins Middle School, where the Demogorgon comes out of his hiding and becomes a visible opponent. At that point, it's more about 11 confronting whatever she had caused to exist, rather than the act of defeating the monster. The decision to end the arc with her vanishing keeps the horror unresolved, leaving room for future consequences. The Demogorgon shapes the story of Season 1 through action, reaction, and absence. Every major plotline, from Joyce's disappearance to Hopper's investigation, the kids' alliance with 11, and the lab's cover-up, traces back to the moment the Demogorgon took Will. The creature's presence creates fear and forces every character to reveal who they really are when the world stops making sense. Demodog, life cycle and transformation. The Demogorgon species introduced in Stranger Things follows a clear biological development. At each stage, a new and increasing threat is presented. This change can be best noticed by looking at the character of Dustin, who finds and nurtures a creature called D'Artagnan, or Dart, within the second season. The show also provides a narrative of how a seemingly innocent organism can mature into a full-grown predator, further giving it a consistently similar sense of tension and dread when viewers recognize that something so small can also be the same monster shown in the previous season. The life cycle begins when a host is implanted with a larva. The host is typically a human who has come in contact with the Upside Down. This is evident in the case of Will Byers and Barb, who had tendrils down their throats once they were abducted. Later, Will coughs up a slug-like creature, and Eleven notices one emerge from the mouth of Barb when she explores the Upside Down. These larvae are darkish green and look like ordinary slugs, but a little larger and yellow-spotted. The larva then undergoes a molt into what the show refers to as a pollywog. They're tiny enough to be easily held in the palm of a child, and they possess an incredibly transparent skin, which is yellow-green in color. They grow simple limbs and tails. We see Dart being in visible distress and reacting strongly to heat when he eats a candy bar given to Dustin. The show establishes that the Demogorgon species adapts rapidly and feeds aggressively. The third stage introduces major physical changes and is informally called the Frogogorgon. It is much darker in color and grows bigger while developing hind legs and sharp teeth. It is also now able to move much faster and feeds on small animals. The visual cues make the shift clear, even though this particular phase is transitional and not separated by molting. Dart becomes more active and starts hunting. Once the creature has consumed enough food, it molts into its fourth form. It's referred to as Catagorgon. It begins to display core traits of the adult Demogorgon as it reaches the size of a house cat. It gains the characteristic of an open petal mouth filled with rows of sharp teeth and becomes fully carnivorous. It no longer avoids light and becomes comfortable above ground, all of which are the turning point where the danger becomes unmistakable. The fifth phase, as called by Dustin, is the Demodog. These are bigger, quadrupedal creatures who are more than capable of hunting adult humans in packs. They burrow through the ground, climb over walls, and fight off ordinary weapons. One Demodog is shown surviving multiple gunshots before being killed. The creature begins working as an extension of the Mind Flayer's influence and becomes a real threat to the town. They appear during crucial moments in Season 2, including the siege at Hawkins' lab, further enforcing how they operate as part of the larger positioning of the Upside Down operations. As seen in Season 1, the final stage is the full-grown Demogorgon, which we've already discussed previously. Tracking Dart's transformation over just a few episodes creates a sense of urgency. What begins as a minor discovery escalates quickly into a serious threat. This gradual reveal also adds weight to earlier events. By showing the full growth process, the series implies that the Upside Down's dangers are scalable, adaptable, and ongoing. Even when the original Demogorgon is defeated, something smaller can take its place and grow into the same threat. Demodog explained. Pack behavior and threat. Dustin realizes a little too late that Dart is not a rare species, but one of many Demodog creatures that operate as a single pack. They share a hive mind connection controlled by the Mind Flayer, allowing them to coordinate even across large distances. As soon as Will gets possessed, the Mind Flayer has direct access to Hawkins' lab. It gains access to a building plan, security vulnerabilities, and centralized staff members through him. The knowledge is applied right away. The Demodogs ambush the lab as they cut the power and kill the guards. There's no doubt that they were not behaving randomly, and this was very well calculated. The greatest illustration of their threat is portrayed in the death of Bob Newby. Bob ends up separated while restoring power to help other people escape. He seems to be able to make it out alive at first, but a Demodog spots him at the very last minute. In a few seconds, other people arrive at the scene and crowd around him. Joyce is simply powerless to stop Bob from being killed in front of her. This scene restores the fact that the Demodogs are obedient to what the Mind Flayer demands. Each use of force, whether it's an ambush in the laboratory or the tunnel scenes, reveals a tactical action to advance the presence of the Mind Flayer into the real world. The Demodogs are already in the lab when the group returns to close the gate. It further supports that the Mind Flayer considers them as being a threat and is applying the Demodogs as a shield. This twist adds stakes in the season. The Demodogs change the risks of individual monster attacks into a well-planned attack, which makes the conflict more urgent and more dangerous. Demobat. Introduction and design. In Season 4 of Stranger Things, the Demobats are shown as a new danger in the Upside Down. They're first seen when Henry Creel, having been exiled to Dimension X, sees them circling over his head. They're later encountered by Steve Harrington and the others as they enter into the alternate version of Hawkins in 1986. These are fast-moving creatures that prey on Steve with their sharp teeth and vine-like tails that can strangle their victims. Demobats aren't part of the same evolutionary line as Demogorgons and Demodogs. They're flying extensions of the hive mind of Vecna, behaving more as scouts or enforcers than ground troops. They're the only moving airborne beings in the Upside Down, keeping Vecna at a huge advantage. In appearance, Demobats are similar to bats, but they lack eyes and have broad, tooth-filled jaws. Their final versions of tails have smooth and flexible limbs, although their tails were initially meant to be serrated. They camouflage in their environment when stationary, making them harder to detect. They still have the black blood and general appearance of connections to the larger hive, and yet have a different purpose now, one of spying and the other of swarming instead of attacking with brute force. One of the scenes that involve the Demobats include the death of Eddie Munson. He provokes a swarm off a gate, and is overpowered and overwhelmed in the end, emphasizing their large numbers. Marvelous verdict. The Demogorgon, Demodog, and Demobat introduce distinct threats and drive the plot in Stranger Things. Their individual actions have more horror elements, which add new shape to the show. As we delve deeper into these creatures, it becomes clearer how the series blends suspense and supernatural elements. If you like this video, don't forget to visit the rest of our channel, where we upload videos of all your favorite characters every day. However, for now, we've reached the end of our video. We hope to see you soon in the next one, and until then, stay safe and stay marvelous.